Brad,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm just going to open this up after everything has been discussed.
Sounds good to me.
So yeah, I think that's easier, and based on what we've seen so far, there doesn't seem to be a lot of people that speak up.
Yeah,
So,
I agree.
since we're not taking any action, we can wait until the end and they can identify what they want to speak to.
That certainly works for me.
Okay, just so
Abby,
you
I do have one citizen wrote in to me today.
Okay, and what item is that on?
It is on the proposed redesign of Remembrance Park.
Okay, I think that's agenda item 2. Let me see.
Yes.
Yeah, item 2. Well, Lori, I think I think we're going to still wait until the end so that everybody is going to wait.
Yeah, that's fine. I just wanted to let you know I do have a citizen.
Okay, okay, good. Yeah. And I have had several people contact me as well, so I'm just going to do a little ad-libbing here and there when we get down to that.
I'm gonna go ahead and mute everybody right now for a minute, and you'll be right back.
Okay. We have council in the room. Is everyone here? I think we have
Yes.
to unmute everyone.
Yeah, everybody is, I've sent the request to unmute everyone.
I can barely hear you, Brad.
Really? I sent the request to unmute everybody.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor. How are you? Hey, Jose, congratulations on your Employee of the Month.
Is the vice mayor here? I can't see everyone.
Good evening. Yes, I'm here.
Okay, and how about Councilmember Brandon? I see Councilmember D'Ambra.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, who else am we missing here? Councilmember Prince.
Dennis. I'm live right now.
I think we're just missing Bruce.
Okay, okay, Lori's here.
Yep.
Hi there, here you are.
I'm here. I'm just setting up the other chaos over there.
Okay. We still have a couple of minutes. Brad, if Councilmember Prince joins us, would you just let us know that when he's there?
I'll keep an eye out for him. Yep.
Yeah, we'll start the meeting and then we'll just announce that he has joined the meeting. All right, so we'll get started. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a Village of Tequesta Council workshop. It is Monday, August 31st, 2020, and it is 6 p.m. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Brennan,
Here.
Vice Mayor Stone,
Here.
Councilmember Brandon,
Here.
Councilmember DeAmbra,
Here,
Councilmember Prince.
All right, thank you. To help prevent the spread of COVID-19, this workshop is being held remotely using Zoom and YouTube as has been authorized by Governor Ron DeSantis. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
so moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, this evening we have 5 items on the workshop agenda. To maintain order and efficiency, we will take public comment after council has discussed all of the agenda items, since in fact we do not take action on any of these items this evening. The clerk will read comment cards before opening the phone lines. If you plan on speaking, please state your name and address for the record and reference which items you wish to speak to. If you do not plan on speaking, please mute your phones now. In fact, if you're not planning on speaking until after the meeting, if you would mute your phones, that would be greatly appreciated. So let's begin with item 1, which is council discussion of ordinance 07-20, which has to do with vacation and short-term rentals. Keith, do you want to take this?
Thank you, Mayor. In 2011, the Florida legislature passed a law that preempted regulation of vacation rentals to the state in terms of allowing them at all, in terms of duration of stay and the number of times per year that the use could occur if you didn't already have something in your local codes at that time. Tequesta does not have anything in its local ordinances that regulates vacation rentals. As it stands right now, the law continues to preempt regulation of vacation rentals in terms of complete prohibitions in terms of the number of times a short-term rental can occur or the duration of the short-term rental. However, there are still limited things a local government can regulate at this time. You can regulate maximum occupancy, parking. You can require a vacation rental to register and be permitted at the local level, which can include annual inspections for fire safety and other code-related items. You can regulate parking and noise, require the vacation rental use to post and provide contact information for a 24/7 responsible party. The draft ordinance that's in the backup is an example of something that Tequesta could do if you wanted to, in terms of regulating vacation rentals based on what the current state law allows. Over the last several years, there have been attempts at additional legislation, both to increase the preemption and also to eliminate the preemption. So there's sort of been a push in both directions. None of them have been successful. We continue to expect to see additional legislation this coming session that may increase preemption that may or may not make that retroactive, and also on the other side, legislation that may attempt to loosen or eliminate the preemption. So this, in discussions with the village manager, this was prepared as an example of what the village can do today under current state law to regulate vacation rentals. This ordinance would really touch on all the things that I mentioned. It would require a vacation rental property to register, to have, and the registration would require them to show proof of their state regulation licenses. They're being signed up at the state and county level for payment of state and state tax, as well as county vacation and bed tax. Would require the inspections, would regulate parking, require the responsible party notification, would provide penalties for violations. So this is a draft, and it's presented to you in a workshop for discussion on whether you want to proceed in this fashion at all. And if you do, what you'd like to see in terms of the things that are left for local governments to regulate at this time.
I guess I'll start. I've had 3 calls from residents who obviously are surprised, actually, that we would have to allow short-term rentals. They thought for sure we didn't have that. And they expressed for their neighborhoods that it would just be it would not be a good thing for them. They don't see it. Now, one of the things I thought when they said parking would be that you could limit the number of people, that would be there as well through parking. However, and I still can't seem to get this straight, and I would like this also brought up at some point, is parking on the lawn. And I keep going round and round with this, and I've been told that our ordinance does not allow parking on the lawn. And then I've spoken with a police officer or 2, and they are saying it does allow parking on the lawn, which I'm thinking, again, if we are going to try and limit the number of people, let's say, we've all heard about these parties. We've heard about the fact that people will rent these homes and then have a big party, which means they're not staying there. They wouldn't have to register them. But if they're allowed to park on the lawn, that would be another thing that perhaps we could stop if that was the case. So if I can once and for all find out if we have an ordinance that stops parking on the lawn, that would be helpful as well. The people that have called me are definitely opposed to short-term vacation rentals. Now, I have a question, Keith. Condominiums, for instance, can they have their own regulations about what people can do when they move in and they go through a whole process? Are they subject to the state preempting them as well, or are they able to stop any type of short-term rental like that?
Well, the state law speaks to local government preemption. So condominiums and other association regulated residential neighborhoods typically, well, they have their own association documents that typically limit how often you can rent. But the statute, I think the short answer is that the statute speaks to what a local government can and can't do. So condominiums, they have their own whole chapter of state law that regulates what they can and can't do, and their documents almost, and I can tell you just by experience, just about every set of condo docs I've ever looked at has a provision that restricts rental in some form or fashion.
And they cannot be preempted by the state.
Well, no, I'm just saying that the statute that we're dealing with is limited to the preemption of local government. There's a whole nother chapter of state law that deals with condominium regulations. And I did not research that prior to our workshop to tell you definitively what a condo can and can't do in terms of that. But I know that they, just as I said, pretty much every set of docs I've ever seen has rental restrictions in them.
Right.
Yeah, having lived in a couple of condos, I think the HOA documents which you agree to at the time of purchase, you are entering into a contract where you agree to abide by whatever the rules are and whatever the requirements are. So if they have restrictions in that regard, again, I'm not an expert enough to say state couldn't preempt it, but certainly my own experience has been that those rules and regulations are applicable to anybody who buys, and you have to abide by them. Otherwise, the board will come after you. They've made that, at least in the 2 instances I've been involved with, in terms of living in condos, they've made that pretty clear. But Keith, I have a question here, because you already said that state law prevents local government from prohibiting these rentals. Are we talking about this because we've actually had a problem and we've had people complain? Or would this be an attempt to preempt some of those issues that could occur? Because again, I hate for us to legislate unnecessarily. I'm still a believer in limited government. It's one thing if we've had existing problems in the community that we're trying to address or alleviate. If we're simply anticipating that we might, I guess I'm opening to hearing what the risks are associated with that. But I'm just curious as to, aside from the existence of the state law, what might be driving this at this point in time.
And I guess with your permission, I'd look to Mr. Allen on that, if he's seen any, what he's had in terms of resident comments on that. I mean, I prepared the document. I can't speak to what kind of comments Village Hall has received.
So I'll speak to that there. I mean, both of those things driving it. I know since I've been here, I think there's 2 incidents where we had basically a rental with some parties that we, couldn't necessarily regulate. I think it's, with the state talking about further preemptions, I think it'd be in our best interest that we could, I'll say, regulate those things. I have had a couple of conversations with council members about this, and so thought it'd be worthy of having a conversation of doing it or not.
Yeah, no, I think the conversation is definitely worthwhile. Let me just pose this question another way. If I own a home, and I'm not renting it, but I own a home, and I decide that, and I have a daughter getting married, and we have a bunch of out-of-town guests. I saw that in the regulations, it limited gatherings to 20 people. But if I'm a homeowner and under the scenario I just painted, and we decide to have a party for 40 people, I don't think there's anything that prevents me from having a party for 40 people. So what would be the logical basis then for saying a homeowner who owns the home doesn't, basically can do as they please, where somebody who's, let's say, vacationing has a legitimate reason to have a party, we artificially cap it at 20. Do we have any issues there that we need to be concerned about?
So what this issue is trying to address is not your example. Transient occupancy is defined at the state law level as a rental of 30 days or less, more than 3 times a year. So that's what it's designed to, and short-term, that's what short-term vacation rentals are about. It's the repetitive transient occupancy by different groups of people for short periods of time. If you were a homeowner and you wanted to have your one occasion event, that's not what this is about. If you wanted to rent your property twice a year for 2 6-month blocks, that's not what this is about. This is about the short-term repetitive, this weekend you got this group, next weekend you got another group, weekend after that you got a third group. That's what this is designed to address.
No, and I understand that. I guess what I was getting at though is, let's say it is a short-term rental, it's a week. Somebody comes in, and I'll use my scenario. Daughter's getting married. They decide they want to have a party at the house in addition to wherever the wedding's being held. And they're going to have 25 or 30 people instead of a cap of 20. If I'm a private homeowner, I can do that. I'm just
Certainly.
looking at, is there a concern or an issue with having one cap under identical scenarios in terms of what the property is being used for? One's a private homeowner, the other's a short-term vacation rental. Is there any legal issue there where in one case you can and one case you can't? In my understanding, you correct me if I'm wrong, Keith, but the genesis for the state law really had to do with an attempt by Monroe County, as I recall, particularly in the Keys, to try and really severely limit the renting of homes down there for vacation purposes. And I thought that was the genesis for the state law originally.
I think it was, but again, so your example still, you have your one big event, that's fine. Now, if you had your one big event this week and your next, some other event the next week with a whole different group of people, and then the third week you let someone else with a whole different group of people again come and go, that's what we're talking about. You're not, if you have a big family and every week you have your extended family come and stay with you for a period of time, that's
And I get that. Again,
good for
let me be
you.
more specific. Is
Or
there an
God bless you,
issue?
but
Is there an issue if there's a cap on the short-term rental, but a homeowner can exceed that cap? Do we have any kind of a legal issue there where somebody, let's say the owner of the home says, wait a minute, I want to rent this out. Somebody's going to have a larger gathering for a legitimate reason. If I'm the homeowner, I can do it. Why can't the person who's renting it from me do it? Is there a legal issue there where
Well-
somebody could come back and contest that? I don't know. I'm just asking the question.
I think
Well,
there's
we're
a,
not allowed to do that. That's one of the things that's preempted. The duration and the number of times that can be rented are preempted to the state. We are not allowed to regulate that. No local, if you didn't have that on your books before June of 2011, you're not allowed to regulate that anymore. So we can't make that distinction.
I understand. The only distinction I'm asking is the homeowner can do one thing, i.e. have a larger group gathering. The short-term renter, we're saying, is prohibited. Does that in and of itself cause an issue legally?
But they're not prohibited. We can't prohibit it.
No.
Frank,
You're missing. For some reason, I'm not getting the question through. If
Frank,
there's a difference in numbers, is there a legal issue where one party can have a larger group gathering, another party, because under the proposed ordinance, it says the maximum number of people that can gather is 20. That's what I'm getting at, is the two numbers.
Well, there's code on the books right now that regulate the number of warm bodies that can occupy any dwelling, and the building official is familiar with those. So that applies whether it's a vacation rental or not. There's occupancy limits across the board for everybody.
I think the vice mayor is trying to get in there, Frank. Did you want to say something?
Frank, I think I completely hear and understand exactly what you're asking. I think the difference is one is a resident, one is a business. I know that I've had to file a special permit to have a party at my home. And I had to get that approved through the regular process for a party that was greater, I think it was 50 people. And so that is, I think, two separate things that I don't think you want to blend them together. One's a residence, one's a business. And so that's one thing that I was going to add. And then the other thing I was going to add is, I noticed that Councilwoman Brandon's was muted, but now she's not. Okay,
There we go. Sorry, I was trying to fix it.
you're good.
Yeah, and that is correct. One of the registration requirements in the draft ordinance that you could impose is the requirement that they show they've paid their business tax, and that they've showed they have their state license, and that they pay their state tax and their county bed tax. So all of those things are also part of the suggested registration process.
The biggest complaint I usually get is towards more the Airbnbs where you have transient people coming for a few days here and there. Is what is the regulation on monitoring who is coming, such as are they a registered sex offender or a felon, etc.
Yeah, we can't get into that depth of regulation. What you can do is require the vacation rental, when it registers, to provide an example of its lease agreement. They have to have a responsible person who is available 24/7, not only by telephone, but to be able to get on site within, I think, 60 minutes if there's an issue. And then back to the mayor's original question, I'm looking at section 78,693 in our code, and it's very clear. It says parking in the grass or on gravel or other non-living landscape material in any zoning district is prohibited.
Thank you.
So we did that, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. I remember making that code clarification.
I thought we did, but
We did.
we weren't getting it clearly. We're not getting it enforced, I think.
So that can be enforced, noise can be enforced in terms of if there's a out of control party. And these really are the only things that are left for a local government to be able to do if you want to do them in terms of vacation rentals. And as I said at the beginning of this, I expect everybody expects bills to be introduced this coming session on both sides of the equation. The vacation rental industry has a strong lobby, though the law has not changed to local governments' further detriment in the last few years. Don't know what's going to happen in the future.
So let me ask one last question. You're introducing a whole new regulatory component, obviously, with respect to rental homes, which goes back to my original question: is have we really had an issue with this or a problem, or are we anticipating we might, and it's simply a preemption? But to the point you just made, Keith, about the fact that there could be new legislation coming down from the state level, should we wait and see? If we don't have a problem now, and if we don't have an issue that is, causing concern to the residents, would it be smart to wait until we see what the state does next session before we move forward with any kind of a ordinance for the village of Tequesta?
Okay.
Well, the other argument is if legislation passes that further if you don't have something on your books by January of 2021, you're preempted from doing anything further, then you're locked out further. I don't know that will happen. And quite frankly, there have been attempts at legislation that invokes retroactive
You mentioned
preemption.
that.
So even if you had something on the books, that state law would propose to make it null and void. So, nobody knows.
Councilmember Dion.
No, so what would be your best legal advice at this point?
If the village is experiencing issues that the proposed regulations in terms of registration and monitoring and inspections would help with, then I think that's a good argument to proceed. That in addition to I'm comfortable saying that this issue will continue to be introduced at the state level in some form or fashion, whether it provides for going forward preemptions or retroactive, I don't know, but I would say if you have something on the books, then and they don't retroactively preempt it, you've at least got that. Now, to my original comment and concern about your original comment, introducing an entirely new regulatory scheme, because that is what we're doing. If on the other hand, this, you're just wanting to add code on the chance that you're further locked out in the future, but you're not really experiencing actual complaints, then
I can speak specifically. I know of a family that has moved out of the village of Tequesta because on either side of their home, they had short-term rental properties, and each week they would have a new visitor that would come in and show up. I've heard of other complaints as well, of people not understanding or realizing that we didn't have anything on the books at all. I think if we put a poll out there and asked our residents, you would probably find out that a lot of them would be shocked that there wasn't some form of restrictions. And I think we've got to be careful at over-regulating it, and I completely agree with you, Frank. But I do see it differently in the aspect of I do see short-term rentals as a business. I know a lot of people that own short-term rentals as a business, and it's a business entity, and yet we're not treating it as such. Because it's kind of in that gray area, even though we have the ability to. I think we made it very clear it's not a long-term rental agreement. This is short-term, week in, week out, new people coming in. I definitely think we should move forward with something. There's a lot in this proposal that I don't agree with, that I think that deserves further conversation. But absolutely, I think we should have something on there that helps identify the business owners within our municipality and require those to be available and work when there's a situation.
And to the vice mayor's comment, we already require the payment of business taxes. So there's already, and although that's not a regulatory scheme, it does involve, we have systems out there already, to my understanding, that invoke certain inspections of businesses. So, and I certainly don't want to speak for the building department, but I don't know that this would be an overwhelming burden to add to, how we inspect and permit things. That this, as drafted, was intended to blend with the schedule for payment of business taxes and that sort of thing, as opposed to being its own element hanging out there on its own. It was intended to blend with that process already. And to your further comment, Vice Mayor, as I said, this is, in my opinion, the most you could do. So by all means, you can dial it back to what you feel is appropriate.
I also did a quick search on VRBO of residents that are available tonight. There's around 30 in the village of Tequesta right now, just on that one website that we can go in short term and stay in there for a day, 2 days, or 3 days. I do have a question though, Keith, with regards to this is obviously a home or a condo or single family, multifamily. It doesn't address someone renting out a room inside of a home. Is that something that is, because there are people that just rent out rooms and that's just what they do.
And so if you're in a single family residence and you're renting out a room, that would be a violation of that. You're not supposed to just rent out a room like a boarding house. And if that's an issue, that's something entirely different that we can look at. Because I don't believe that that's permissible at all.
Under current code?
I'm just, by definition of a single family residence, if you're renting out a room to someone else, it's no longer a single family, but by definition.
I am aware, I'm aware that I think that's happening. And I just wasn't aware that wasn't against the code. So,
and that's a very difficult thing to prove in terms of establishing a violation. That's, with these vacation rentals, it's not so hard. The parade of license plates, the different people every week, but just one person renting a room, that's very easy to fly under the radar.
Well, I'm saying short-term rentals of a room where they come in for a week or two and keep moving on.
Yeah, because even with the vacation rental model, you're renting the entire residence. You're not renting a room to family A and a different room to family B. That's a whole different problem because it's a single family residence. It's supposed to be occupied by one family.
The only other question that I have a couple more questions if we continue talking, but one that's important to me is, would this require a new position in the village of Tequesta to manage and monitor the regulation?
The answer is that no, not at this time. I mean, obviously, if we get to a larger workforce, it will take us a while to put it in as a permit and and put together that system. I think that'll take us a few months to do that, but I don't feel at this time it would take an extra staff member now. And Jose just unmuted, but I don't think there's a lot of registered ones now. So if you were to take the existing number, I would say no. I mean, obviously, if we have 150 of them pop up, maybe that would change our workload a little bit. But currently, I don't think we'd need another staff member. We need a new process.
But the permitting process, we could capture that cost.
Right, we could. We try to, depending on how many there are. I mean, obviously, we were 30 at $100. That's not really going to cover another staff member, but we wouldn't need another staff member for that. But if we start getting into the couple hundreds, then we start talking about that cost benefit, cost benefit for it.
Yeah, and Kyle, I concur with a lot of what you said. My point in asking a lot of the questions I did was to make sure we've really thought this through, fleshed it out, and given it the proper consideration. So maybe playing a little devil's advocate here, but wanting to make sure that if we go forward with this, we really have looked at it from every angle, and at the end of the day, any legislation we pass, any regulatory structure we create, really addresses the key elements that need to be addressed. But just the process of requiring people to register in and of itself may eliminate, some of these people that are doing some of these DBROs, because if they have to all of a sudden pay the taxes, register, and do all the rest, that may discourage some people, in fact, from participating in that effort. So unless they really are just investors and they truly are just running it as a business.
This, obviously, we could talk about this, but I guess I'm not sure that the vice mayor and Councilmember D'Ambra have the exact same things that they would want to remove from this or to tweak from this. So I guess the only thing I could say otherwise than, having a whole workshop just devoted to this is that perhaps you can speak with the manager, give him your feedback on this, figure out what makes sense for several people, and then we could get Keith to come back to us with a different document. Does that sound good?
Yep, sounds good.
No problem.
All right. Okay, Keith, so we will just keep working on this.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Item 2, discussion on Parks Master Plan for both Tequesta Park and Remembrance Park. This says that Greg is going to be speaking with us, or Jeremy?
Well, Greg is going to speak to it. I just will open this. Is that him? I just will open this by saying this is a very first look at both of these concepts. And so nothing is voted on tonight. Obviously, if we can get comments, suggestions, I know there's already been a few floating around, but this is very preliminary. We're not even to the point where we have maintenance costs, or, we obviously don't have money dedicated in the budget. So this is really just the opening stages of when you start a park master plan, of really getting feedback. And, after we get to a concept that we think we like, we can, survey the public and, continue through that process. So this is very first stage. So if there's things that need changes, we can obviously do that. And then I'll let Greg kind of talk about the concepts and how they came about.
Greg, do you want to speak out? Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good.
Yep.
So just to kind of go on what Jeremy was saying, basically these concepts did come from not me just sitting here, coming up with the ideas myself. They were more generated from, talking with residents, surveys, from special interest groups, emails received on, input, what they would like, what they would not like. They're strictly just sketches. It's a good starting point for us to kind of have a goal to shoot for. And the other thing is that we've got 2 grants that we've just, that we've received, and one of them is for Remembrance Park. It's a $50,000 non-matching. So we need kind of like a starting base to apply the money to regarding Remembrance Park. And as we go after other grants, for Tequesta Park too, we need kind of like a master plan so that we can say, oh, here's a priority, we can go after this and, kind of focus in on certain areas within the master plan. I don't know how to share a screen. I can try. I can just walk you through. Does that work?
You want to take it, you want to start with Remembrance Park then, Greg? Or, okay, we're going to Tequesta Park. Okay.
That worked, Greg. That worked.
Does this work?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. So we can just walk right through this. Now, this plan basically doesn't really impact the park in its existing state, meaning no trees were removed or anything like that. So where you see roads, it's kind of like there's already something there that leads back to an open area where the parking lot is for the quad baseball complex. A lot of things already exist there. The dog park, the Girl Scout building, basically I added a playground and possibly putting the skate park over there. and with the existing basketball courts. The only really big change is right there on the front is where you see 3 multi-purpose fields, and that's based on need and current user groups, i.e. lacrosse, soccer. We'll be able to put events on those fields. If we ever move away from other areas and we want to put a Tequesta Fest or whatever, we'll have the ability to do that on those 3 multi-purpose fields. And in the back, addresses baseball, or softball needs in the back. And that's pretty much it for Tequesta Park. Any questions?
I just want to make a comment on this. It's very ambitious and it looks wonderful.
Sure.
But I think that before we would really move forward in any investment, because I'm still thinking it's going to be a very big investment, that we should be looking at potential partners in this. And whether it's the JTAA or others, sponsor, if you will, I think that there's 2 things here. The first is obviously building it. And I know you're going to be looking for grants and looking for money. But if we could also have a partner such that we would have the maintenance of all of this, especially if it becomes so popular that we are hosting travel games and things, that would be a lot of maintenance on the village. That would be an expense on the village. And I think before we move forward, because I love it, it's a great plan, that we have to think about costs. We have to think about maintenance as we move forward in this. And I'd love to see us find a partner, if we could partner too.
Yeah, Mayor, I completely concur that moving forward, we are going to need a partner on the maintenance side. I think we've talked in the past about looking for the state for earmarks to really develop it from a capital standpoint. It is state land. It is open to everybody. It's not just for Tequesta resident use. Obviously, JTA and others are going to want to use this facility. It appears that Mr. Snyder is likely going to be our representative. So we've talked in the past about reaching out because other municipalities and other entities have been able to procure earmarks. And I think this is a very worthy project and is worthy of the state's consideration in that regard. So you're right. Obviously, to build this out, we're talking about a substantial expense, which the village cannot underwrite or afford at this point. So it's kind of a 2-pronged approach. One, seeing if we can get the state money or partner money, either way, or a combination of both to build out the capital structure. But then I agree completely with you that we're going to need some partners in terms of the ongoing maintenance costs as well.
So a couple of things I want to talk about. I'm a father of 4 kids, and they're highly involved in the different organizations throughout this area. And this is the idea of thinking forward and planning more long-term is part of what I do as a career, and it's important to me that we actually have a point of a direction of where we're headed to. One person said, if you want to achieve your goals, you need to start talking about it. And so I think it's important that we just start talking about it. I know that I have met with 4 different organizations that would be willing to help and contribute, that love the idea of trying to create a facility in Tequesta that meets the needs of the local community. And there is a desperate need for fields. There's a desperate need for more baseball fields. We've got residents that are driving down to Palm Beach Gardens now to utilize their facilities because there's not enough in this area. And so it's, for me, I think we should control the process and have the vision of what it is that we want, and then reach out to those stakeholders that want to participate, that are looking for a home, that need a home, and are willing to contribute. And they're out there. They're already ready to start right now. And I think it's good that we start this conversation, we control it, we design it based on what's best for our residents, and start working towards a plan. And as funding comes available, we have an idea of where we want to put that. It's already been designed and planned for. So I'm just thrilled that we're talking about it and hope that we continue to talk about it because I think there are entities that want to utilize that space. I just want to make sure it's in the best interest of our residents.
Thank you. I think we're all saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Is there anything that anybody doesn't like about the concept that, you know, obviously if there's something that's not liked that Greg or his team have put in there and I've endorsed this, but if there's something that's not in there or something that you guys think that we should consider, I think now's the time just to maybe throw those ideas out there so we can continue to work through this plan.
Councilmember Brandon was just coming in to say something on this.
I mean, not too much anything different than what you guys have already said. I think it's a beautiful design. I think for most of us, that park is a thorn in our side because it's not really utilized to the best it can be. I definitely think we should partner with other organizations, but I do feel strongly that Tequesta should be absolutely one of those partners to some degree, so that way we can utilize it. So if Greg wants to do something with one of those fields, we can. Mr. Stone, I do agree with you. I know there's a lot of fields in Jupiter and gardens, but they're so highly used by organizations that oftentimes, let's say myself or you want to take the kids to just go hit some balls, the fields aren't available. So that's where I'm a little iffy on sharing with organizations. I just think if we are going to join up with them, which I know we have to, funding wise at least, I just want to make sure that Tequesta gets utilization of it. Nothing right off the bat is popping off the screen what shouldn't be there. I think the dog park, is it split into two or is it still one?
Well, that in that concept that we had, it was a little bit before we applied for the dog grant. We did this design, but on that one right there, it just shows one. But obviously, we have a different design that we submitted for the dog grant.
That's fine. And are we doing anything with the Girl Scout building, or is it just going to stay the same?
That doesn't belong to us. So
Okay, so it stays the same.
It pretty much stays unless they want to do something to it themselves. That's up to them.
Greg, my only other question is near bullet point number 3. What is that? Is that concrete area, picnic area? Is that a building?
Oh, number 3 is the skate park.
Okay. With like what, like bowls and half pipes?
Well, basically just move, because when I built the skate park years ago, it's all module, so it can be moved that purposely, just in case if things needed to be changed, like the layout of the park, or we decide that we want to put it somewhere else. Like if we wanted to move it to Tequesta Park, it can easily be assembled and moved to a different location.
Okay.
So Greg, would the idea here be to, because I really like the skate park over in this location, would the idea be to move it there and then free up the space that we have at Constitution Park if we're able to get this done?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
It's just an active park. It kind of fits the concept with everything else that's going on here.
Looks good. It looks good.
From a management standpoint, you could manage it to probably a lot easier, and instead of having it all kind of, separated. So.
Right.
And let me just add one thing. I mean, I think the mayor touched on it a little bit. We'll have the same conversation for Remembrance Park, but obviously with this concept, this could be a 7 to 10 year vision for the park. I mean, it could, if we don't get any partners, it may never come. But typically you do this with a master, with a parks plan, as you say, what is the vision for the park? And then we can piece it together. I mean, I know there's some interested people with tennis and pickleball, interested people with, baseball. Of course, you got JTAA. So if we can get those partners, we do this in phases as we get those partnerships. But to the mayor's point, we will have additional maintenance costs. So that'll be something that we have to consider when we look at those partnerships as well.
Any other questions on Tequesta Park? All right, then let's move back to Remembrance Park. There we go.
So this was at the beginning, a site for the rec center, which changed locations, which I think we're in a better location now. And a lot of people that lived in the surrounding areas wanted to see something more passive. So we kind of took the passive concept and incorporated some elements into it that people were commenting, in their surveys over the years. We've been asked a lot about the splash pad, and I know it's one of those things, that we wanted to put here at Constitution Park, but there's just so much already going on in this location that I thought that we could do something very, very small and, put it in here. So basically, all we have is just taking input. There was comments about a green market, trying to bring that back to the village, incorporating the 2 walking trails so that people can do a connectivity from Constitution Park. They can do a lap. They could walk down, up the road, and they're in another walking path area. So there's nice connectivity between the 2 locations with the walking path that's around the perimeter with a nice green open space area. Of course, there can be trees added in there for shade, but I wanted to keep it open so that if we wanted to do a nice green market, we could get vendors in and vendors out really easy, and people could walk around the walking path and view booths, and you could still go over there and just lay in the grass and a nice kind of passive recreation area. And then moving east, you see the 30 by 30 pavilion with potentially, I added a restroom, which would be kind of like a 1 restroom type thing. With the splash pad, lots of landscaping, and a few parking spaces on the front. So, it just basically, it's just listening to what they'd like over the years. And, we tried to incorporate it into kind of a passive recreation area too. Yeah, it's a starting point. It's a starting point. It's been sitting there vacant. We keep the grass mowed, but it'd be nice to get in there and start to do something with the 50,000 that we have.
All right, who would like to start?
I'll start.
Okay.
Greg, what was your thinking for putting the splash pad in the front?
It's more, I was thinking of the police officers, if they need to drive by, it could be more visible from the road. I didn't want to stick it way in the back because it's a very deep and narrow lot. And I would want to keep, kind of that activity more up to the front, but that can be changed too. There was really, when I sat down with the landscape architect, I gave him ideas and he put it on paper.
Okay. I mean, I don't disagree with that. I was just asking because a big concern that I personally have with the splash pad is knowing how many little or few there are. And if it's right there near the road and everyone finds out about it, how do we manage it not getting overcrowded? Because the word will spread and people will flock to it is what I'm concerned about. I'm not against it. I'm just concerned about managing how many visitors.
That is a very good question. Yes.
I personally am not a big fan of the splash pad here at this location. I think Tequesta Park would be a better location for a splash pad. For a passive park, it should be passive, not inviting a bunch of little kids to be very active. And so I love the idea of the passive side of things, and love the idea of more natural, local, bushes that are and trees that are native to the area, creating somewhat of a farmer's market at times if necessary. To me, around all the neighborhoods that are around there, just and close enough to, this intersection here, art events, there's a lot of different things that I think can be utilized for that open space in more of a passive area to go and relax. So I love the idea. I'm glad we're again thinking forward.
And I don't disagree with that either, Mr. Stone. That's why I was kind of asking, because it's probably going to draw a lot of visitors to it.
And I agree, it's too close to the road, too many kids, worried about them running around. I think that Tequesta Park is a better place. You can put it, near and away from the busy roads that are in the area. Busy in our world.
I also agree about having the splash pad somewhere else. I think by putting it there, it adds another element of, not to mention cost and maintenance, of course, is that we have Constitution Park, which is just going to be amazing, is already amazing. And then if we can do all of this work at Tequesta Park, I think having a real passive park with more trees, we can have a lot of people in the middle and still have shade trees. As we know, Paradise Park, one of the problems we have in there is it's just, you bake, you absolutely bake. So if there's a way to incorporate more trees, I don't even think a restroom, it would be the right thing to put here. It's more plumbing, it's maintenance, it's worry about is it being properly maintained. We know already at Constitution Park and Tequesta Park, some people just don't maintain those things. You have to deal with that. If we could have just a really nice passive park with some beautiful trees that, between the two parks that have so much activity, I would like to see that for this particular this space.
I'm going to agree with basically what everybody else is saying. I think that the more shade trees you have, Mark commented on this in his email to all of us.
Right.
I think this park particularly lends itself to being passive, the trees, the walking path. He did mention a water feature, which I thought was a nice idea. But again, the mayor's point is now you got plumbing and the costs associated with all that. I think the other thing, when I think about a splash pad too, I think of who's using the splash pad, what age group is using it. And this is why I've always felt like the splash pad at Constitution Park made more sense.
Right.
Even over to Tequesta Park, because it's usually the smaller kids, the kids that are anywhere from 3 to 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. And if they're out at Constitution Park and they're running around, they're playing and they're getting hot and sweaty and it's in the summertime, then they can duck into the splash pad. To me, that's the ideal place for it. I would say Tequesta Park would be a second choice, but I concur with what everyone else is saying. I prefer to have it in one of those two places and truly use this as a passive park.
A nice place that down in Palm Beach Gardens, the North District Park has a similar concept to what we're talking about for Tequesta Park. It has, it doesn't have any ball fields. Over by the tennis courts, they have, do they have? No, I don't think they have any ball fields. It's all multi-purpose fields, but they have a water feature playground combination. So if you get a chance to go through that park and visit it, it's really, really nice, well done, well thought out, but very, very expensive.
Yeah.
But you're right. It would fit very well at Tequesta Park. Yeah.
Yeah, and you've got a school age playground there too. So if you wanted to, that would, as the vice mayor suggested, that would be your other alternative, is to locate it in proximity to that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Any other?
Yeah, well, it's good. I appreciate all the work you guys have put into this, and as Kyle said, we need a strategic plan going forward, and I think we've got the basis of that right here.
Yes. Thank you for doing this. They both look good. So I guess you would just see if you couldn't redesign Remembrance Park then for
Absolutely. Us. Yes. Yep.
Okay. Any other questions for Greg or Jeremy on this? All right.
Just to be clear, redesign Remembrance Park, and are we going to add the splash pad to Tequesta as a concept? Tequesta Park?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
Okay. All right, then let's move on to the e-bike ordinance, item number 3. And Jeremy, what do you want to do with this? You want to take this?
I think Keith's gonna give it a run.
All right, Keith.
Thank you, Mayor. This past legislative session, the legislature passed House Bill 971, which was signed into law, which is going to create a new section in the state uniform traffic control chapter 316 that allows that provides for e-bicycle regulations and allows local governments expressly to regulate e-bikes within their jurisdiction under this new state law. So e-bikes are, there's 3 different classes. They can be a bike with a motor that operates only when the rider is pedaling with a top assisted speed of 20 miles an hour, or a bike with a motor that operates without the rider pedaling with a top assisted speed of 20 miles an hour, or motors that operate again when the rider is pedaling with a higher speed of up to 28 miles an hour. So the state law would allow a local government to adopt ordinances that regulate where these types of devices can be operated within the jurisdiction. We don't think you can do a wholesale prohibition, but you can do things like restrict them to areas where there's less pedestrian traffic in order to protect pedestrians, sidewalks. You can regulate how they're parked. You can let's see, I'm just going through my memo very briefly. You can have certain targeted prohibitions. As I said, sidewalk, you can prohibit them on sidewalks, other rights of way that are shared with pedestrians. And then on the commercial side, the state law doesn't really, it doesn't address this issue, but under general zoning and home rule, it would seem that I believe a local government can deal with this type of a use in terms of an e-bike rental, for example, based on zoning. So this is a new law that will be, I believe it's going to be effective on January 1st of 2021. This memo was provided for your information and to discuss if this is something that you felt needed further attention in Tequesta.
Vice Mayor, I think you brought this to us in terms of the mobility that you've been working on.
Yes, that is correct. And it's my understanding that currently, under our current code, the e-bikes are not allowable. And so now that the state has made it something that is allowable, I do agree with, or not agree, I appreciate Keith putting an opinion out there so we can at least talk about it. For me, I would like to at least do something with regards to the commercial side of things, and not necessarily allow a business to come in those requests, which I don't think is going to happen anytime soon, but if they did, they'd at least come bring it to our attention and tell us how they would manage it. We can determine what we want to do going forward. But I've been in some cities where the e-bike businesses are out there, and there's just bikes and scooters all over the place. And I just don't necessarily want that happening in our backyard at this moment. So yeah, I do think we should at least put something together.
I have a question. Unfortunately, most of our sidewalks are most of them are 4 feet and some of them are 6 feet. Neither of them become a multi-use path. So you have to have an 8-foot wide pathway to be a multi-use path. And now on the other hand, we've got so many streets all throughout the country club that have no sidewalks, that if we were to allow these bikes, then they have all that flexibility there's lots of places. I know right here on Dover where I live, even though it's not okay at this point, there's going back and forth. They just have a great time, the people that are riding them. But I am concerned about the sidewalks. And right now, even my walking, let's say a dog, you walk a dog in the street, you've got plenty of room to maneuver around somebody. I'm walking the dog on a sidewalk, and I hear people behind me, or I hear someone yell behind you, I have to jump into the grass. There's just not enough room. So I wondered what everybody thought about not having them ride on sidewalks, if that's possible.
Well, Keith, if it's going X amount of speed, isn't it not allowed on the sidewalk then?
That would be something you could prohibit. You could say e-bikes are prohibited on any sidewalk under this.
Much like golf carts. The street legal
Much like-
golf carts have to go at least 25.
Yeah, these go either, I guess, up to 20 or up to 28, depending on how big the motor is. But I mean, even 20 miles an hour on a pedestrian sidewalk is pretty quick compared to somebody walking.
Can
Of course,
you
of course,
regulate,
even with- I'm sorry, go ahead, Kyle.
sorry, Frank, can you regulate someone's being irresponsible or, reckless and put it towards that level versus?
And I would think it seems to me that in terms of you would have two different kinds of violations. You could have something that violates not only a local ordinance but also current state law. For example, reckless or careless driving and endangering a pedestrian. There's already traffic laws in Chapter 316 that deal with careless and reckless driving of vehicles, so I think those would be handled through the uniform traffic citation type of a enforcement mechanism, like getting a speeding ticket, versus someone who violated only a Tequesta ordinance. For example, a unlawful rental or riding on our sidewalk, regardless of the manner. Which might be handled via either a local citation or code enforcement. But yeah, I think that, yes, the short answer is if you're being negligent or careless or reckless, that would be something you could be cited for.
Because I'd hate to see a person on an e-bike that is going 5 miles an hour on a sidewalk be cited, or 2 miles an hour. That's not being reckless and acting like a normal bike. So I would really focus more on the behavior and not necessarily the item.
And I think much like whether or not a motorist in a car is issued a speeding ticket, your law enforcement officers and even your code enforcement officers have discretion in any given case on how to handle the situation, whether to issue a citation or provide some friendly education and a warning.
It's on a flat surface, which Tequesta mostly is. Even riding a regular bike, even as a kid, I think all of us know you can get up to 20 miles an hour pretty well on just a regular bike when you're just pedaling along. I'd like to see them regulated the same fashion we regulate bikes, but I do have one question, Keith. Class 2 and Class 3, where you can get up to 20 miles an hour without pedaling, or even faster if you can, or if you are. Is it permissible to put an age limit on those? In other words, say we're going to treat it as a regular bike for Class 1, but for Class 2 and 3, where you can either get to 20 without physical exertion, or 3 where you do and you exceed it, can you say you have to be a certain age, 12 years old or whatever, where you're saying there's an expected level of maturity that comes with that age that would be appropriate to ride that particular type of bicycle?
I don't think my 7-year-old can do it.
Hey, we've all seen 8-year-olds out there driving golf carts, and we know they're not supposed to be.
So the new law, one of the things the new law says is that an e-bike operator shall be afforded all the rights and privileges and be subject to all the duties of a bicycle or the operator of a bicycle. So I'm not sure that to the extent we can't put an age limit on a bicycle rider, that we could put an age limit on an e-bike rider. I'd have to look a little more closely, but it would seem that the language of this new statute would, there could be an issue there.
Well, we wouldn't, obviously we're not prohibiting, but we would simply say at a certain speed without physical exertion, or at a higher speed with it, that those speeds are such that there could be an endangerment. So you need a certain level of maturity. You know, again, I'd like to see it classified the same way we classify bikes, period. But for class 2 and 3, I'd like to see a differentiation, again, based on age and based on maturity. Even though we all know 12-year-olds aren't all created equal, or for that matter, 30-year-olds aren't all created equal, but you know, you can make some delineation.
Yeah, my based on what I've read to this point, I'm not sure we can do that. We can look a little more closely, but it would seem that the law is not going to make a distinction in terms of if you can be on a bicycle, you could be on an e-bicycle, and whatever regulations apply to a bicycle, like the 16 under 16, you're supposed to have to wear a helmet, and you know, any other traffic related, you know, sharing the road kind of regulations would all apply. But I didn't see anything that said you could
No, I understand.
prohibition on it by age of an e-bike differently than you could do it on a bicycle.
Yeah,
So
no, I understand.
Yeah,
I understand that. I didn't see anything that said you could not either. And that's where I'm saying that, you know, it's just like we have age limits for certain things based on the risk elements involved. And I think the class 2 and 3 involve a higher degree of risk than class 1 in an
I
ordinary.
understand. Yeah. Well, what I'll have to do is see, because there's language where it says that the e-bike operator is afforded the same rights as a bicycle operator. So I will have to see if there's any way to maneuver an age restriction into that language or not. But
Okay.
that's where the issue is going to be.
Okay.
Going back to the sidewalk issue, I don't know who lives on a street with a sidewalk, but first of all, who's going to enforce it? Who's going to watch it? If you have young people without driver's license, how are you going to give them a ticket if they're going to be, you know, irresponsible? I think that there are enough roads all around the village that don't have sidewalks that you could allow people to ride. I'm worried about that piece, like I said, because right now, even when young people come by with bicycles, when I'm on this, they are expecting me to get off the sidewalk. They are expecting when they're coming towards me, they're staying on the sidewalk and I'm getting off the sidewalk. I worry about the, you know, I just think that is, a lot of the things that they're doing now, Kyle, with mobility are in new projects that are coming online. The places that are being new building, they are making 8-foot wide sidewalks all the way through them, because that way you do have a true multi-use path that 2 people can be going by each other, and, you know, motorized bicycle, probably 2 of them can go by each other. I'm just a little worried because so many, you know, our community is older, and so many of our sidewalks are nowhere near that size. And even 6 feet, it's better. It is better, but there's a lot that are still 4 feet, and I am worried about the bicycles on those sidewalks. That's my only thought. And I don't know if the chief is here, Chief Medina. I didn't know do we want to have him weigh in on enforcement and/or his thoughts from a safety standpoint? Is Chief Medina here?
I think he's here, and I think it'd be good to get his opinion. I know he has rendered some thoughts to me, and so it'd be good to compare that to you guys as well.
Evening, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yes. Manager and I actually spoke about this today in that regards of being on the sidewalk. I think anytime, you know, the bicycles right now are allowed on the sidewalk. However, when we're talking at the speeds of 20 and 28 miles per hour, I think, you know, it could be a potential hazard for not only the pedestrian, but also the individual operating the e-bike. So, you know, I share with you the same concerns in regards to being on the sidewalk, you know, and by the same token, I know on the flip side of that, if we're talking about say a 10-year-old, and we tell him he can't be on the sidewalk, he could be on the street. I mean, God forbid, he's an inexperienced driver as well. You know, that also has a potential for danger as well. So, you know, it's a tricky situation in that regard. From an enforcement, you know, we would handle it like we would anything else in regards to if complaint driven, when people call or when the officers see it, addressing it like Keith said in regards to if they're driving recklessly in that manner, we can cite them with a UTC in that regard. But, you know, I share your concern in regards to the sidewalk. We have some elderly people that walk, you know, our sidewalks, and, you know, they're not as wide. So, you know, that is a concern. But at the same token, I get, you know, again, the age of, you know, are we then telling a 10-year-old go on the street where they could potentially be struck by a vehicle? So I think it's a double-edged sword on both regards.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add, I don't disagree with the concern at all. I think that any vehicle moving at above 28 miles an hour on a sidewalk is reckless. I think you're getting into a very difficult situation of identifying what bike is what on what sidewalk. And I would just more, you know, enforce the behavior and not necessarily the bike, because I do know my neighbor just likes to go and cruise at a very slow speed, but let the electrical bike do all the work. And, you know, I've just in this conversation, I've seen 3 people on bikes on our sidewalks right here down Tequesta Drive. Are they e-bikes? I don't know, but I think they're behaving correctly. They're riding a bike in a safe way. And I think that is easier to manage more than a bike that you can't really tell it's an e-bike or not, just by the looks of it. So I just think it's too difficult to regulate the actual e-bike on a sidewalk versus the behavior, which, you know, no one wants to see anybody, even on a bike, going 20, 25 miles an hour down the sidewalk. So that's all that I just think it's easier to regulate the behavior versus the bike.
Well, I guess that brings us back then, if there isn't support for not being on the sidewalk, I guess there are 3 different, Keith, you told us there are 3 different types of bicycle. And
Yes.
I guess maybe that's something we can discuss.
Yes, there's 3 different classes depending on the speed and whether the speed is reached being pedal assisted or not.
I mean, I'm just curious if that matters or not, if you have to pedal it or if you can just let it go. If we're going to be amenable to having these bikes, then I guess I'm just trying to figure out what would be the safest, or if it doesn't matter. I mean, I just don't know. I haven't ridden one.
Well, Keith, you said we can't prohibit them, correct?
Is
But
it,
we
you know, the
can't
law says you can
But we
regulate.
can regulate it.
You can, yes. And
Yeah.
so it used the word regulate. It did not use the word prohibit. So it would seem that you can place reasonable regulations, but a wholesale no e-bikes in Tequesta would probably not survive a challenge.
So could you, for example, when I was talking about ages, could you sit there and could you have a regulation that says e-bikes will be treated like regular bicycles? However, if you have an e-bike that can be powered at 20 miles an hour or greater, or 28 miles with a physical assist, that those bikes have to be registered to be legal in the village. And like I said, to try and put an age limit on it, because in the same way that we say people, you know, kids can't drive cars until they're 16. I agree with the vice mayor when he says when you start talking about going 25, 28 miles an hour, again, I don't want them in the streets if they're kids, because I think there's a greater risk to the child from the car than there is to a pedestrian from a bike under most circumstances. But at a certain speed, that risk increases, which is why I was advocating for trying, if we can, to put age limits on the class 2 and 3.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because the law creates these different classes, but then it has these general statements that say an electric bicycle is a vehicle to the same extent as a regular bicycle, and a an e-bike operator is afforded the same rights as a regular bike operator without distinguishing the different classes. But then it says local government, can adopt an ordinance that governs the operation of electronic bicycles on streets, highways, sidewalks, and sidewalk areas under its jurisdiction. So this is all brand new stuff. There's
I would make the argument if you wanted to treat them all the same, you would not have created 3 different classes. The fact that they created
that's why I say that's the argument on the other side.
Yeah.
In terms of your question about licensing,
or registering, like we require boats
Yeah.
to be registered.
So the statute will say that an electronic bicycle operator is not subject to provisions of law relating to financial responsibility, driver or motor vehicle licenses, vehicle registration, title certificates, off-highway motorcycles or off-highway vehicles. So the statute would seem to say that, no, they're not subject to any kind of registration or licensing requirement any more than a regular bicycle would be.
Keith, what happens if we do nothing right now with this? I mean, what happens? What's
I
our
think
enforcement?
that if nothing is done, then you have regular bicycles and we have whatever rules we have for those, and an e-bicycle would fall into the exact same category of rules at this time. So if you can ride a bicycle on the sidewalk, you could ride an e-bike on the sidewalk. The laws that regulate how a bicycle is ridden on the roads would apply to an e-bike as well. That if nothing happened, these would be considered bicycles for purposes of regulation and enforcement.
So there doesn't need to be any action, is what you're saying.
So in terms of how they're looked at and used, they would be the same as a bicycle. In terms of the commercial side and rentals and that, you would, there's nothing that prohibits those in our code at this time in terms of the commercial side.
Whatever happened to just good old pedaling?
I know.
We're in the age of electronic everything.
I know, but Keith, my only question, and it's not anything on Tequesta's side really, but if an e-bike can go up to 28 miles an hour and I'm looking at one, how is that treated differently than a golf cart that's electric? I would think a golf cart would almost be safer because it's on 4 wheels, it's more balanced, it's easier to just push a brake. No?
Yeah, but if you hit somebody,
Well, I know that, but I mean, I've been on those e-bikes, they're super fun. I don't know if I'd put my 7-year-old on one, but just curious why they treat them differently.
Lobbies.
well, you got to look at how fast the car can go, the speed, the weight of the vehicle, what happens if that plows into somebody. I think the damage a golf cart can do is exponentially greater than the damage of a bike.
I know, it's just we're talking about, I don't think we'll put them on sidewalks, but that's the conversation essentially. And, if we're not gonna let a golf cart on a sidewalk going 25 miles an hour with moms pushing strollers and our elderly residents walking that might not be able to sense something behind them as efficiently, I don't know if we should allow something with a motor essentially on there, but I don't think we could do it anyways, because like Mayor said, the sidewalks are very small.
Keith, if I can go back and ask one more question. So I looked at our ordinance. It does say currently that nothing is allowed on our sidewalks unless it's human powered. But you were saying if we do nothing, it would treat bicycles the same as e-bikes, the same as bicycles. But in my mind, if we would have to do something with that particular ordinance. I know we could have probably talked about this earlier, but that was a question in my head.
Keith is muted.
So I'm trying to find, what we need to move forward one way or another. And if we're not going to take action, we still need to take action.
So, and I apologize, I seem to have dropped out in the middle of Miss Brandon's comments and then came back unmuted. So to the extent we have a local ordinance already that says what you just explained, and to the extent that that captures an e-bike because it is motor assisted, then that may already solve the issue. If you had absolutely nothing under this new statute, the e-bike will be looked at the same as a bicycle. But if we already have an ordinance that says if it's motorized and if in any form or fashion and it's not allowed on the sidewalk, I think that would capture this because it's a motorized device, and that would still violate our local ordinance.
Well, it sounds like
Except for the class
Well,
one.
Keith, I thought you said the state law said it had to be treated like a regular bike and it could be regulated but not prohibited.
Right, we're talking about on the sidewalks.
Oh.
You can absolutely prohibit e-bikes on sidewalks or other like pedestrian trails or things like that.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm sorry. I didn't get that distinction before.
Yeah, you could say not on a sidewalk, not on a pedestrian path. You could say not on certain roads where maybe you don't have a sidewalk, but you have a lot of pedestrians that walk along the side of the road. You can have targeted prohibitions. You just can't say nowhere, no way, no how, anywhere.
Keith, how do you think the law would determine the word assist?
I'm sorry, Vice Mayor. How
do you think the courts would determine the word assist with regards to, a person has to pedal to get the bike to be moving? It's being humanly operated and has the word assist because it's an e-bike.
It seems to me, just based on the plain language, that you've got the motor, but you also have to pedal to help the motor get to that top speed.
So
And
to
there all
Kyle's
by
point,
itself.
are we saying class 1 and class 3 because they require human assistance would fall within our current definition?
And Jeremy, our definition says nothing motorized. Is that, I don't have the
right,
code.
nothing motorized. I mean, I can read it to you. I think
I mean, if it's,
it has to be human power only, nothing with motors.
So, and I mean, I would argue that regardless of the class, these are all vehicles that have a motor that contributes to the propulsion of the thing. And then our ordinance, and that's contrary to our ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
I would be comfortable making that argument.
Yeah, and again, I don't necessarily have a problem with them not on sidewalks. I just think it's something that is very difficult for residents to comprehend, why a bike can be on a sidewalk and why a assist e-bike is not allowed to be on a sidewalk. And my concern is that we would do more of an enforcement versus an education, and creating a teachable moment when people come across it. Just because we can, versus looking at the overall behavior of recklessness or not recklessness is my concern.
So let's wrap this a little bit. Keith, our ordinance now would prohibit them on the sidewalk, I think. That's what we've decided. Is that true?
I would
Jeremy?
make that, I would be comfortable taking that position based on that language.
Okay. So, and I understand where the vice mayor is going. If you're assisting it to get to that point, then you are humanly being involved in this process. That would be, I think, options 1 and 3.
Well, I mean, just to throw it out there, you can turn it off and pedal. And
correct.
How do you
Right.
know? I just
Well,
such a
and
prayer.
I said, even without the electric assist, you can get up to 20 miles an hour on a straightaway on a normal bike. So
Yeah.
I would not be opposed to class 1 being allowed, particularly because you've got a 10, 12, 14-year-old kid. I'd rather see him on the sidewalk than on the road. I think there's a greater risk, as the chief already said. So if we can distinguish by class, I'd say class 1 can go on a sidewalk, class 2 and 3 cannot. And then as you said earlier, it's a matter of educating the community as to why it is, if we actually put this forth, why we would be putting it forth in the manner that we are.
And the other thing I'd add is right now, I don't think there is a problem with e-bikes or e-bikes on sidewalks. I just want to make sure that we're ahead of the game and have these conversations prior to an issue coming forth.
Well, I think they haven't been on the sidewalks because at this time it would be illegal. They're
on the sidewalks. I've seen them many times on the sidewalks.
And where we should have not allowed that apparently. But that, I'm not saying that that has to be the way it is. I'm just saying that currently that is not what I'm understanding our ordinance to be.
Unless they have it turned off.
Unless they have it turned off, of course, that would make sense. I guess I still go back to 4-foot wide sidewalks. Yeah. And somebody coming up, you're right, a bike can go 20 miles an hour, but generally speaking, that person's in there, that's a rider. That's somebody with the bike pants on and a helmet going down the road for the most part. These are more for all ages, I believe, or not all ages, but they can be a lot younger since we don't have any capability of, regulating that. I just would want to figure a way that we could make it as safe as possible on these sidewalks if people are going to ride it on the sidewalk. Jeremy, did Country Club end up being 6 foot wide?
No, I think that Doug will probably get to actually chime in. They're not, I don't believe they're 6 feet, but Doug can chime in.
Okay. I thought that was that we were trying to do that, but we ended up not doing that to make them a little wider because that's a very narrow pathway as well.
With Doug being here, let's let him answer that. If I don't know, Greg or I can find Doug.
Yeah, I'm looking for him.
Jeremy, what code section were you looking at while you're looking for Doug?
316.008.
Oh, state law.
Yeah.
I was looking at our code and I couldn't. Okay.
Good evening, Mayor. The sidewalks on Country Club Drive are 6 foot wide.
They are.
Yes.
All right, because they weren't always, right? Some of them were at 4 feet at one point.
On Country Club Drive, they were always 6 feet.
I think things have grown over on them, Mayor, and they
maybe that's what it was.
Kind of shrunk us.
There is definitely sections that weren't 6 feet wide.
Yes.
I see. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Doug.
You're welcome.
So just, it sounds like there's some discrepancy with regards to state and local code, maybe. And maybe we can give the back to the manager and Keith to maybe come up with a suggestion.
And I think we'd want to solicit, public comment on this as well.
Yeah, I think so. Definitely.
We can do that. We can work on it.
We could do that. Because there are a lot of pedestrians, I would say, that, just need to weigh in, and they may be also the e-bike riders, and they can, just go and want to do both, and that's fine, but let's throw that out to them as well. I'd like to see that if we could get Lori to put it online and get some opinions as we've done with other things.
Yeah, because 316.008 kind of gives a laundry list of things local governments can do, which includes regulating sidewalks and regulating bicycles and regulating how persons on roller skates and scooters, and so that section tells you what you can do. But I'm not sure now, again, that we actually have an ordinance on the books that says you can't ride a bicycle that's the motor with the motor on the sidewalk. So.
Okay. Well, I think the Vice Mayor brings a very good point to the village, and that we have to try and do better with the mobility options as well. I just want to make sure that it's safe, and that that's really what the community wants as well. So I guess what we'll do, Jeremy, we're throwing it back to you
Okay,
at this time.
I'll catch it.
Is that good, everyone?
Yes.
All right, let's go to item 4, which is the discussion on the signage in the rights of way.
So back in April, if you guys remember, we did relax some of the commercial signs to allow one sign for the businesses to put out a sign either in the right of way parking lot that was a little bit outside of the code in order to give the business an opportunity to showcase that they were open during this phase 1 kind of transition, what businesses were open, which ones weren't. With the election kind of bearing down, and we just had one, but also with us moving into some other phases with Palm Beach County, a majority of our businesses are open or, or allowed to be open during this phase with some restrictions. Staff is asking to put the full signage code back in place, and we'll work with those business owners to regain compliance. We feel like it's in the best interest to go ahead and put those sign codes back in place now that we're kind of in a different place with COVID and businesses being open.
I would say once we move to phase 2, I would agree with that. And since we're anticipating that may happen soon, that gives you an opportunity to notify people of that action at that point in time. I did talk with the village attorney, Mr. Davis, about the issue regarding political signs, which I thought had been addressed, but he told me it has never actually been put to bed. I know there was council discussion about allowing political signs in right-of-ways for a limited period of time for an upcoming elections. It might be a week, 10 days, but as soon as it was over, they had to be pulled. I'll throw it out for council discussion, but I am in favor of allowing for a limited window for political signs to be displayed. I think that's important, and I don't think we should be pulling those signs, but I do think it has to be, like I said, for a defined period of time, whether that's 7 days, 10 days, whatever the council decides upon, and then once the election's over, they've got to be removed the very next day. To me, that's kind of gets into a line of freedom of speech, and I think the political process is so important that we can allow for some limited flexibility in that regard.
Hey, Frank, you're not the first person to kind of bring that up, resident-wise at least. Do you mean the right-of-ways of people's yards or the right-of-ways inside of Tequesta in the village, such as the shopping centers?
It could be both. I mean, we've had people who put signs in people's yards in the right-of-way, and the homeowner was okay with it, and we're pulling those because they're not set back. So I would say it's in any right-of-way. Now, obviously, if it's a homeowner, I think you should have the courtesy to knock on that door and make sure that they're okay with it. If not, they might pull it. But certainly, both there and in the commercial areas, I would say, I think you got to have a uniform approach to this. But like I said, for a very defined period of time, so it doesn't become an eyesore.
I agree with the phase 2, and I think, Jeremy, the same contact that you did before when you let them know that they would be, I'm talking about the businesses, to let them know ahead of time as much as we can that phase 2 is it. I think one of the things we were concerned about is you let some people have a sign, and then the other people are saying, well, why can't I have a sign? For instance, Jose, just so you know, on Sundays, when I don't believe we have code compliance out there, the realtors at the corner of Tequesta Drive and Country Club Drive are putting up multiple open house signs, multiple. And they're not well done. They're not put in nicely. They're just thrown up there. And I do believe that the realtors realize that we're not going to be doing anything about it. My concern, Frank, is that, and I hear what you're saying just for political signs, but once you do that, you open that door, it's hard for other people to say, well, they've got a sign. Why can't I put up a sign? And I think that's what we looked at the council right before you came back, Frank, was to say, look, if we're going to make an ordinance, we're going to make an ordinance, and it's going to have to be adhered to. So I guess that's back to us now, essentially is what you're saying. Okay with the ordinance except for 7 days or so before an election. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm advocating. And Keith, correct me if I'm wrong. When I talked to Keith about it, I thought it had actually been agreed to that there would be that limited window, but Keith said no, that had never, correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm saying the wrong thing, that had never been decided upon. Not that the council said no to it, but it never said yes to it either. Is that a correct statement, Keith?
So your current code, as well as the ordinance that we have finally moved through LPA and that you'll actually be seeing on first reading in September, the revised sign ordinance has always said and continues to say that you're not allowed to put temporary signs in any village right of way. When you start saying, talking in terms of political, making an exception for political signs for some limited period of time before the event, that is completely a content-based decision that has been found to be unconstitutional by the recent case, that Reed versus Gilbert case from a couple of years back at the United States Supreme Court. And the ordinance that's coming back to council that you've workshopped multiple times and we've I think got a very good product, has addressed that issue in terms of temporary signs, and we've taken out the distinction and then the description of calling it a political sign or a church sign, or the distinctions that we make now are commercial speech and non-commercial speech. There is the blanket prohibition in village rights of way remains. I'm aware of the discussions from years past about not pulling signs out of the rights of way during certain periods of time. But we've now gotten to a place where, as the manager said, we have, because of the desire to assist local business when they were allowed to start reopening, we've allowed certain temporary signs in the right of way. We're now getting into, we've already had a county level primary election. We've got a general election coming up in a couple of months. And it's going to be very difficult to start making the distinction. Well, the business can have its temporary sign in the right of way, but you can't have your election sign in the right of way that's the same size and the same shape and made out of the same material, but one says now open and one says vote for me. That's completely I can't defend that. It's just not defensible. So, and same thing with the grace period, we'll call it. The vote for me sign's okay during the grace period, but the happy birthday sign is not. There's no way to successfully defend that. So, the most recent workshop discussions at the council, in my recollection, is that you have an ordinance, enforce the ordinance, no temporary signs in the right of way.
I think the logic behind allowing the businesses was that we had an emergency declaration.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed.
So again, maybe if this has been decided, that's great. I just remember, as you said, Mayor, prior conversations were we were going to allow a window for political signs, but if you're saying that's not defensible and we can't make that exception just for political signs and nothing else, and if the Supreme Court decision came back and obviously rendered that, well, then that sounds to me like that's decided.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think so, because once again, if you are an individual and you want to promote a candidate, you can put it on your lawn. So It's not like there can't be a sign, but I think we have to stick with it. I think we can't just selectively pick and choose.
Okay, that's fine.
Any other comments from council on that one?
I'll just add, I agree that we should send out that communication to the businesses once we go to phase 2 to remove signs. I agree that we should, whatever our ordinance is, make sure it's being enforced. And I don't think we should be able to put signs in the right away.
We enforce it.
So I think, I'm just guessing real quick while we're all talking about the letter. I mean, I think from what it sounds like, reading, you guys have probably read it too, that Palm Beach County has a plan to ask the governor September 8th to be in phase 2. And so being able to put out a letter, let's see how the conversation goes tomorrow, and then we'll formulate the letter based on that meeting and what comes.
Makes
Jeremy,
sense.
you and I
Letter.
discussed, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'd say we can work on the letter, but we're going to hold it. We'll hold for a day just to see how that meeting goes.
All right. We had discussed getting out to the realtor associations, the Jupiter, Tequesta, Hobe Sound, and the one that's based out of Miami. If we were to get that information to them and they get it to their members, there would be an opportunity to say, you can't say you didn't know about it. This came to you, rather than sending it to all the different realtors. But if we can get to whatever groups that they are represented by, could we do something like that, Keith, in terms of letting these organizations know that that we are not okay with realtor signs in the rights of way at all?
Yes.
Okay, anything else on that one? All right, let's go to number 5, and this is on discussion on procedures for, I look at this as we're talking about being in chambers, I think, as compared to being in person. I think that we're looking at in chambers for council meetings. Is that what we're doing here, Jeremy? Basically, if we're going to go into chambers, how are we going to handle that?
Yeah, I know. In that, I know the conversations, and I know there's a lot of desire too from council. And so, if we are starting to talk about going to phase 2 from the county side, I mean, I've always told you guys that's when we should start firing up our conversations for the in-person meetings, but not before then. Well, we're kind of at that level where Palm Beach County is talking about it. I mean, obviously they haven't agreed to it yet, and the date does not agree to it. But if we were going to do that, what is the policies and procedures that we will have in place for council meetings, and make sure that the public knows of them, make sure just basically set the expectations for those meetings. And so this backup or the procedures for in-person, you guys have those. If there's something else that you'd like added, or make sure just talk about the process, we can do that. I know a couple other items that maybe not addressed there is that, we won't have senior staff members there unless they have something on the agenda. That'll keep them out of there, keep them out of the council chambers. I know, the chief, Trub and I, we went back and forth with some other items to consider. I mean, we could screen temperatures if the council wanted to do that. I don't feel like that's something we should do. We obviously will have some other little nuances when we do this about wiping the podium down. There's gonna have to be a staff member that does that. Of course, checking people, make sure everybody's wearing their mask. There'll be some staff assignments other than just the staff that are in the room that'll be there. But, we can work on that process from the staffing standpoint, but there's other considerations just besides having the 6 or 7 of us in a room and say, we all feel safe. There's staff members that we have to consider, and just make sure that we're doing this right. The village so far has had a good track record, knock on wood, of really doing everything we could to be safe. And we've had a good track record of that. And so if we start talking about basically opening this platform, we just want to try to do everything we can to make sure that everybody's safe, staff, citizens, and of course, anybody else who'd be in there. So I'm open to consideration or comments just on the process, the policies. I don't think that this takes any kind of council action because it's really just procedures, what we're doing, but I wanted to make sure everybody was on board with what we're doing, and we will post these to the public when we get ready to have in-person meetings.
I love the idea of getting back to some normalcy and doing it in a safe way. One question I have though is, let's, trying to think of the future. If let's say one of my kids, happens to get sick and test positive for COVID, obviously I wouldn't want to come to the meeting, and even though I feel fine and have no symptoms, would I still be able to participate via remotely?
As long as the government.
Yeah,
I was
Keith.
going to talk from the technical standpoint first, Keith, and it may answer your statute. So as long as you will be able to watch, but you won't be able, we won't open the phone lines for you to comment. And so if you
No.
do have a comment or suggestion, you write it in and you can send that to us ahead of time. But we will not have the capabilities for anybody. We will not open the phone lines. It will be a
Jeremy, I'm
YouTube.
talking
watch only.
specifically.
No, other than a council member absolutely can, as long as we have a quorum. As long as we have a quorum, you absolutely can be on the phone and
We've
be a
done that.
part of the meeting and vote.
Okay.
Yeah, we've done that.
I didn't hear the council member part. I thought we were talking
Yeah.
about.
No, he was talking about himself, I believe.
My apologies.
That's okay. Yeah, we've done that before.
Thank you.
And so long as
The governor
the
keeps the
executive order that
declaration.
allows us to participate the way we're doing this meeting tonight remains in effect, you can do both. You could plan to all appear in person, but to the extent, I mean, if you had a truly a worst case scenario and 3 of you were symptomatic or tested positive, you could still have as many in the room as you can, and the rest could still appear this way. But even when, as you said, Mayor, when under normal conditions, the sunshine law has always been interpreted to allow a member to appear remotely and participate as long as a quorum was physically present in the room.
If I could interject actually for a second, regarding the technology in the council chambers, the vice mayor, I don't think was around the last time we used a phone call for a council member. It is limited to a phone call only. We do not have a video conferencing system in the council chambers. So it's only as good as a speakerphone, essentially placed by your mic.
But since we're going to live stream though, that council member now would be able to watch on live stream.
Yes, and
participate via phone.
There's a delay on that live stream though that you should be aware of. It's about 15 to 45 seconds.
Oh,
Ooh, that much?
Can we shorten that?
There's no way to shorten it. It's built into the platform.
Okay. So Jeremy, I know you've gone through and measured. So is 20 is the absolute maximum we can accommodate when we include the seating around the walls as well as seating in the chairs?
Yeah, so that's, I mean, if you want to keep 6-foot distancing and, you know, do our best to do that, you're looking about 20 people in the council chambers.
Okay. Now, let's say a husband and wife happen to come. We're saying we're not going to move chairs, but they're in the same family unit. Are there situations like that where we might allow somebody to do that? Or are you just saying that just for the sake of consistency and ease, we just want to keep them 6 feet apart?
I mean, we'd probably, you know, be a little bit flexible as long as we still tried to meet all the next people that came in. We sat them and spread them out. I mean, we won't be that rigid, but, you know, I don't know how many people there'll be like that, but we can accommodate that.
Okay.
Jeremy, the 20 is in addition, correct, to council? No?
It's going to be, so you're going to have your
Let's
council
be
members.
clear then. Okay.
Yeah,
So we're looking at probably 8 to 10 other people in the room other than the council members, Lori, myself. In theory, if Keith is there, then you're looking at 8 to 10 other people that could be in the council chambers and meet social distancing.
Okay, I wanted everybody to understand that it wasn't going to be 20 people from the public. We'd be looking more at 10. And we did talk about the staff that's going to be speaking can be in their offices and watching it live streamed as well. And also they would be on the agenda so they could come in only when it is their time to speak, correct?
Right.
They don't need to be in the room to take up, they don't need to take up a space in the room until it's time for them to speak.
Right. There'll be a little bit of logistics with that because if there's a 30-second delay, you know, obviously somebody's going to have to either go get them or we have to say, all right, Chief Medina, and then wait 30 seconds for him to come in the room. So there is some logistical issues with that. We'll work through it though if we need to. But yeah, the idea would be, you know, whoever's, you know, they can wait in the conference room or if they have an office at Village Hall, but not everybody has an office at Village Hall. So we'll have to try to accommodate it another way.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, Jeremy, is phase 3, is that a full reopening so that all the restrictions and everything are removed at that point in time? Do you know?
No, I don't. I mean, obviously, the phases that Palm Beach County and the governor has put us and the other two counties south of us has never really followed the original state phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and then there was a wide open, I think a wide open scenario. So if we kind of stayed close to that, I don't think phase 3 is a wide open. I think there's I guess phase 4 final phase that was, back to, ball games and NFL games and large gatherings. But so it was always a stepped approach, like 25%, then 50, then 75, and then the last phase was 100%. So, obviously it's whatever Palm Beach County and the medical people and the governor decide, how they want to phase us in. But it really hasn't stuck to the original guidelines, per se.
Okay.
Jeremy, I know you have something else you want to introduce, but I wanted to, before we go there, I wanted to go and check with Lori to see if she has any comment cards to be read on the agenda items that we have all discussed. Is Lori there? There she is. Microphone.
Okay.
There you go.
Yes, I have one comment card that is from Robert Shaw of 198 Gulfview Drive. He said, pursuant to, I need to read that, Dare Town Council, after reviewing the Remembrance Park concept sketch developed by Chris Wayne and Associates, I have a few comments. First and foremost, I would hope that the village takes this opportunity to establish a peaceful natural refuge for both residents as well as birds, butterflies, and pollinators. This park could be the home to a variety of native trees and shrubs that would be dramatically reduce irrigation needs compared with conventional turf grass landscaping. Once these plantings are established, the village would save on water consumption year after year. Further, the use of pesticides and herbicides could be dramatically reduced. Since turf grass sprayed with pesticides creates biological deserts, avoiding this ecological disaster should be a priority. The village should strive to reestablish habitats that are destroyed with turf grass monoculture dependent on chemicals designed to kill and a danger to the environment. I could foresee a meandering path, not paved, through a variety of landscaped themed areas of the park. Canopies of shade provided by oak, gumbo limbo, and other natives, with the understory filled with a variety of native shrubs and plantings. A few benches could be installed throughout. While a more eco-Florida friendly design might be a bit more involved to create, it will save on water and maintenance costs for years. I believe with a design such as this, the village could create a peaceful haven worthy of the name Remembrance Park. And just to, as a friendly reminder, Mr. Shaw is on the environmental committee.
And he's also he also lives adjacent to Remembrance Park as well.
Right. Well, I think we took the first step tonight by talking about Remembrance Park, excuse me, being a full passive park. And to the extent that we could integrate things that are more Florida friendly and that would work, I would be all for looking at that as well, since we're going to be redesigning that park. Does anybody have any other comments? All right. Brad, do you want to open the phone lines and we'll see if anyone wants to speak?
Sure. All right. I've sent the request out for everyone to unmute themselves.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. If there is anyone that would like to speak to us now about any of the items on the agenda, please identify yourself and tell us what you would like to speak to us about, please. Doesn't appear that we have anyone. Brad, I guess you can close us up.
Okay,
All right, before we move forward, I did want to reference both Mr. Sapiri and Mr. Bradford. I believe all council have received their comments as well for us to take into consideration. Certainly, I think a lot of people, or several people, I should say, are looking for a passive park that would be more Florida friendly. So we'll go from there. All right, Jeremy, I think something has just come up that you want to speak to us about.
Jeremy's muted.
Jeremy?
He's still muted.
All right, am I back?
Yep.
All right. And Brad, if you can unmute Hugh, he may answer some questions for this while I'm getting the brief. But August 8th, the president issued a memorandum to the Secretary of Treasury to basically defer withholdings, the tax withholdings, so the employer can basically deduct or defer the deductions from employees from September 1st to December 31st, and they will be deferred until the 1st of January. With that deferral, though, comes a whole bunch of questions that have come up for us in that, you know, the employer will still be on the hook for those taxes. And so at that point, you know, you would ask the employees that you withhold it, that they have to make those payments, or the employer would have to make those tax payments for the employee. So basically what we're doing, because this is very new, a lot of questions. I know Hugh has even called a couple of other authorities, asked some questions because it's very vague. We are opting out at this time, and we will continue to collect those taxes from employees just like we normally do. Our payroll period, we're in the middle of running payroll checks that will come out this week. So there's a lot of unknowns that we're not sure. And so I just wanted to bring that to your guys' attention that we are aware of it. However, we're opting out of that program at current time because of just so many unknown questions, and, you know, the fear of, you know, our employees not being taxed for 4 months and then being asked for that 4 months later, you know, could cause some issues. So we have a lot of work to do before we would opt into something like that.
Jeremy, is the intent then to collect and remit, or is the intent to collect, accrue? Because the president had said if he was reelected, he would seek to have that become a permanent alleviation, or whatever, I'm looking for the correct word here, but make that permanent at least for that 4 month period of time. So would we remit or collect and accrue with the idea that if it does become permanent, we could then just distribute those monies to the employees at year end? And if it doesn't, we could remit to the federal government at year end.
Hugh, you want to answer that? I mean, Hugh, we got a little bit of a chuckle out of that because I think there was some conversation about that may being just forgiven, but depending on the election. And
Right.
So I don't think we would be collecting, and we would, as of January, try to collect those uncollected taxes. But I'll let Hugh maybe answer that technical side of that.
Yes, good evening, Mayor, Council, man. Basically, the liability arises whenever we collect the taxes. So as a result, we cannot collect and accrue. We cannot collect and set aside. We have to simply forego the collection until January of 21. And so we'll just simply forego collecting the taxes, and the employees would be responsible through us vicariously for collecting the taxes from January 1st to April 30th next year.
No, the reason I asked the question is when I read the memo you sent out, Jeremy, it seemed, the way it seemed to read, and maybe I misread it, was that basically if the temporary deferral was not made permanent, that those taxes would be due and payable by December 31st. And if they were not paid by December 31st, they would be subject to penalty. So that's why I was asking the question, can you collect and accrue so that if it doesn't become permanent, you can then remit on a timely basis so that there are no penalties, versus collecting, remitting, and then having to go back to the federal government after the fact and say, okay, well, wait a minute, now we want to get that money back for those employees because you ended up making this a permanent deferral.
Yes, Councilman, you have a point, but in terms of the penalties and interest, they begin to accrue April 30th, after April 30th. So essentially May 1st, 2021 is when the penalties and interest kick in. But in terms of any collection whatsoever, the thought is that all employers are to refrain from withholding the Social Security portion, the 6.2% of the eligible employees' wages from September 1st through December 31st. And the definition of eligible employees are those who make less than $104,000 per year. So we are essentially, the recommendation from the president's memo is to withhold collecting or deducting Social Security taxes for the next 4 months.
Right, I understand that, but okay, maybe again, I'm trying to ask the question very clearly. Should we continue to if we collect this from the employees, okay, and we remit it to the federal government, and then they come back and say President Trump wins, and they get at post-election, they're able to pass a law that says, okay, these deferrals are permanent. In other words, you don't owe this tax. How do our employees get that money back if we've already remitted it? Is the federal government saying they will reimburse us for it? Or would we be better off collecting it, accruing it in an account? And then if it isn't deferred, if it isn't made permanent, then we send that money to the federal government at that time.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification. Now I understand what you're saying. I think it's a very, very good assumption, and a lot of the other employers, we're all in a quandary. As a matter of fact, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce staunchly opposes the act as a result. But to kind of address your question, we, along with all other employers, namely the big guys like Walmart, and a lot of the large organizations, they're having a significant juggling act trying to even implement this. The first thing that we did today was reach out to the software developer for our accounting system. And the memo, the Treasury guidance said that this becomes effective September 1st.
Right.
We're sitting on August 31st. We have a pay period this week. So just on the face of it, it's impractical. But to kind of address your question, we, along with, I would venture to say, a significant amount of other employers are faced with the same issue. The first is it's going to be very difficult, if not impractical, to implement this by the September 1st, the first pay period in September. Secondly, if we go down the road of collecting the taxes and then the taxes become forgiven, I think it's going to be significant guidance put out by the Treasury, because we're not going to be in the boat by ourselves. It's more likely that more employers would not follow the guidance than there would be following it. Just simply, it's going to be very difficult to change their computer systems and so forth. So in a nutshell, I think that we would be more in the majority than the minority of what we're doing now, which is not which is to opt out.
Okay, it still doesn't really answer the question. So the question is, you
Right.
collect the money,
Yeah.
okay?
But
And
you don't submit it.
at December 31st, they say, you know what? For September, October, November, December, we have made this deferral permanent. In other words, people do not owe Social Security taxes for those 4 months if you make under $104,000. We've collected that money. If we've remitted it to the IRS, now we have to go back to the IRS and try and regain it.
Mm.
If we don't remit it and we accrue it in an account and they don't make it permanent, you can always then remit it at a later date and time. So that's my question. Are you going to collect and remit to the IRS and then seek a reimbursement if it does become a permanent deferral? Or are you going to collect, accrue it with the idea that if it doesn't become a permanent deferral, then you'll make the payment, but you'll still have taken the money out of the employee's paychecks. So you're not going back to them January 1st and saying, oh, by the way, you now owe us 4 months of Social Security taxes.
Yeah, we'll be collecting and remitting it. The law provides that the liability arises upon collection. So we plan to continue down the road as we have in the past, and it's collecting and remitting the taxes as we have done in the past. We will not withhold the funds, we'll be remitting it to the IRS.
So is your understanding then, if at the end of the year they make this a permanent deferral, that you can then reclaim that money for the employees who have paid that Social Security tax, who now are no longer obligated to do so? Is it clear on how that process is going to work?
Yeah, it is a good point, and I agree with you. But I think that we, along with perhaps, I would venture to say 75% of the other employers would be in the same position. If we take a good, for instance, I think if you take a Walmart, they'll be collecting and remitting as we are. And so the Treasury would have to issue at that point guidance on what to do. I suspect what they will do is the reverse of what's suggested here, is once we collect and remit, what they'll probably do is say, instead of deducting from the first quarter, simply just not deduct. So it would be the corollary of what they're suggesting. Instead of doubling up in January, they would simply say, don't simply just not deduct.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have a question. Is the match due from the employer? No, even without this, is the match due? In other words, does the village still have to pay their share of the Social Security tax?
We do, Mayor.
We do. Okay.
Well, no, I think under this deferral program, the idea was that both the employer and employee portion would be deferred, and that would give employers incentive to hire because they would not be incurring that expense. Double check that for me, but I think if it becomes—
I will. The guidance which came out late Friday was all of 2.5 double space type pages, which are rather sparse, but it focused more on the employee. And so I forwarded our interpretation to the village attorney as well, and he's part of the discussion. So we will look into it as to the full breadth of the law.
Okay, and when you find that out, could you please inform all of us as to, you know, what we believe the correct answer is, and then again, how we think it's best to proceed?
Yes, by far.
Okay, thank you.
Will do.
Okay. Any other questions or comments about this topic or anything else?
I have a couple things I'd like to touch base with. This last couple of weeks, I serve on the steering committee for the Hope Sound Chamber and the Tequesta Business Association. And the Hope Sound has a legislative committee, and they're asking for one of us to participate in that call out, which I think happens monthly. Happy to do it if the council would like for me to. If anybody else is interested, I'm okay too. One of the things that we also talked about is a current BOT and the Tequesta, the businesses. Has any business basically gone under? Is there any local numbers on how many businesses we potentially have lost? I know we've lost, I think, Tuesday Morning and maybe some others, but do we have an actual number on that? Is there a way to get that? We're curious on those numbers. Is there anybody help us on that?
We can provide that with you. We can look at I mean, we can try, give it our best shot, because obviously with the building department and code, I mean, I think we could probably provide something. So I don't have a number for you, but I will report that to you guys.
I think it'd be good to know how many businesses are no longer and how many new businesses potentially too. if there are any out there that are being starting new businesses in the area to help in some way support them. The other thing, the timeline for agendas for council meetings and workshops, is there a standard for that? Is there a way we can get it sooner versus, a couple days before on the agenda?
We can. So there's a schedule that typically goes out. We try to have it, I think, like the Thursday before the meeting. So typically a week. Obviously Mondays, if we follow that Thursday guidelines, it's condensed a little bit. But if we want to, we can provide a different schedule for the Monday, so that way we can get it out maybe by Tuesday. Which will give you a similar timeline. So I can work with that. I'm sure that there was, and it was probably more me just being a little more flexible, so we can back that up on the workshop part of it. Do you think there's a concern on the council meeting side too, where we get it out on a Thursday and you have a Thursday until the next Thursday? Is that still a concern, or you think it's just the workshop time frame?
I personally think that the week is fine for council meeting, which is, I know you've been adhering to. Lori is adamant about that with staff and whatever. I know that our workshops, we've been getting things sometimes the day of or the day before. So I don't know that I need a full week though to do my homework for that, but because it's a workshop, there's no action being taken.
Yeah,
but we can back it up.
I'd prefer if we can have a week for all of them. That would be beneficial in the aspect of balancing a variety of hats that I wear. The more time would be very beneficial for me. And another item, and I'm not sure if any council would like to speak on that at all.
Does anybody else want to speak to needing a week for workshop agendas?
Well, I think a week's ideal, but I also agree with the mayor that if circumstances are such that we've got things in flux and, we get it 4 or 5 days before, I'm okay with that too. I mean, a week can be the goal. I think with the council meetings, that should be the absolute objective, but with a workshop, I think there's a little room for play there, but a week would be great if you can do it.
And then the other thing I'd like to bring up, I'd like for the council to look at the cost of the healthcare benefits that we're paying as a village. A couple things that I missed in the last council meeting. I know Council Member Yamber, you mentioned that we were talking about cost of living and employees having to pay that cost of living with the increase of healthcare. Well, it turns out there's about 45% of our employees don't pay for healthcare benefits within the village of Tequesta. And so, the village has been taking on a large portion of that. And each year it keeps getting larger and larger and larger. That I would like for us to at least discuss it. Obviously, we've approved it for next fiscal year, and I don't think we should make any changes to that whatsoever. But I think the earlier we talk about it, the more that our employees can adjust if necessary. But it is something that I think is vital to address. There is a disconnect with regards to what the percentage that the employees pay and what the village of Tequesta pays compared to the national averages, which I understand. I'd like to get some more local perspective. But I do think this is something that we do need to talk about as a council, if you guys so wish.
Yeah, Kyle, I don't disagree with you. I do think, however, that 75% of our employees are union, 25%, maybe even less, or not. So I really think this is a conversation that needs to be held in consideration of that. So again, I think it is a conversation we'll need to have as we go forward with various discussions in the future. The only thing I wanted to make mention of was we talked last time a little bit about the approach we take with both police in particular, but fire as well, when we bring new employees on. And again, I think 99% of the police officers out there, I think we'd all agree, do a fantastic job. But I also think we've seen some situations where occasionally you have officers who maybe aren't quite equipped to do the job the way we would like. And I think that means that it's very, very important that our police department, our chief and his senior staff, go through the process, and they do, of evaluating people. It's one thing to go through the interview process maybe get some references. But when you have the opportunity to work with somebody, closely for a year, it is much better to identify potential issues and address those before they go off probation. And I think Chief Medina and his staff have done a great job of doing that. And the consequences of not being proactive or effective in doing so, we can see some of that across the country. So I just want to reinforce again what I said last time. I think Chief Medina and his staff have done a great job. And, I clearly would defer to their judgment as to who we should retain in our department, because they're building a team. That team needs to be selfless. They need to have each other's backs. And I think the department we have now, I think, is probably the best we've ever had. And quite honestly, I think Chief Medina is the best chief we've ever had. So I just wanted to compliment him and his team for the work they're doing. And even though I'm singling out the police, I think we've done a great job on the fire side as well.
Thank you. I completely agree. Anything else other than that, Vice Mayor, with what you were talking about? I have to also mention, again, because haven't really have to go through this yet, but the union is where all of these things with health insurance is knocked out. And that's the tough part. And that's really what it all has to be looked at, because I think, as we just decided this last time, that if we do have our senior staff that are not union, to be able to tie them together to the extent that we can with what is negotiated with the CWA, for instance, so that if CWA and we change that health insurance number, as you are suggesting, if we are going to change the contribution to it, that it would also just move its way through the entire non-union staff as well. But that's going to be our tough, that's the tough part.
So I completely understand that, and I'm not suggesting that we make any changes. I do think it's important that we understand that employees that are taking on that single health benefit just for themselves, that the village is paying close to $9,000 annually for them. And for an employee that's getting health benefits as a family, the village is paying close to $22,000 annually for that employee. I think that is really, really important to understand the overall benefits, especially when we're looking at the overall cost of our local government, when the average salary is over $73,000, but yet the overall census for 2018 resident of the village of Tequesta is 64,000. There needs to be some type of a look into, at least specifically, the 1.7 million we're spending on health insurance. And it's something that needs to at least be looked at. And as a council, needs to have a really good understanding on it. I'm not saying that we need to make changes to it, but is there a disconnect from what local other municipalities are paying and the benefits and the type of benefit that are being rendered? I do think that we need to make sure that we're definitely taking care of our first responders. Yes, they're all doing, we have a great team. We just need to, I think, really have a clear understanding on what exactly is going on with regards to that overall cost of that one particular area amongst others.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Definitely. Anything else from the group? All right, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Good night,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone, for joining us. Thank you, staff, and thank you for our guests.
Thank you.